Hello. That's a nice warm welcome. Hello. Hey. Thank you. It's nice to see you. Come in, sit down, close the doors, don't let anyone else in. They're going to miss out. Lovely. Have you all had lunch? Okay, good. I have some announcements to make. They're very important. Before we'd like to start, I would like to thank our sponsor, Omen Studios. And as you know, here at CMC, we depend on the support of numerous sponsors to help create such a great conference. So we are particularly grateful to Omen Studios. Give me a little clap. Thank you very much. Right. Who wants to learn about the metaverse? Hey. The metaverse is going to be the backbone of what's next for children, really, isn't it, when we think about it? And the cynic that I am thinks that actually it's just the internet, isn't it? Really? With some bells on. And that's probably not a bad description, but if we're going to marshal the power of this thing called the metaverse, then, well, we should probably go a little bit further. And it's a rather fun word, isn't it? Metaverse. Meta from the Greek, I think, which means beyond, and verse, contraction of universe. So we're sort of going beyond the universe. What I struggle with a little bit is we haven't quite worked out what this one's about first, yet, have we? And we're trying to work out what comes next. But that's the beauty of what we do when we create content for children. We take what they tell us and we try to move it forward, and children, they embrace what's next. And the thing about technology, as Sir Ken Robinson said, was that technology is anything that was invented after you were born. So to children, the metaverse is just the internet, isn't it? Really? So today's session is actually to help us grown-ups, avoid becoming what will be the boomers of the future. And to do that, we have got three amazing speakers for you. I'm not even joking, probably the very best speakers we could possibly ask for at CMC. In fact, they're so brilliant, I'm going to share their bios with you. The first is Vice President at Lego Group, where she leads global digital consumer engagement, including magazines, apps, websites, games, editorial, community management, particular business responsibility for the Lego Group's digital child rights, safety and well-being, and sits on the Responsible Engagement with Children board. Prior to Lego Group, she was Global Digital Director at BBC Studios, and while there, she developed the BBC's direct-to-consumer offerings, leading the company's short-form and social content production unit, Digital Studios, and ran its global YouTube AVOD publishing networks. There's loads more that Anna Rafferty did, but if you welcome Anna Rafferty to the stage, please give her a clap. Welcome, Anna. So next, we have a very, very dear friend to CMC, strategist, analyst, author, speaker, once and future traveller, connector. This gentleman has led children's media industry in developing sustainable, child-friendly practices for over 35 years. As SVP of Global Trends for Strategy Research Consultancy and Digital Studio Dubbit, he is passionate about kids' evolving possibilities for entertainment, engagement, play and learning, while recognising that child development remains constant. He's also advisory board chair to the International Children's TV Prix Jeunesse and on the Children's Media Association board and the Facebook Youth Advisory Board. Please welcome my favourite American, David Kleeman. Very good. And our final guest is someone whose work has probably influenced anyone in this room that's ever made anything for children, and you probably don't know it. Professor in the Department of Media and Communications at London School of Economics and Political Science, she has published 20 books on media audiences, especially children and young people, risks and opportunities, media literacy, and rights in the digital environment. A new book, Parenting for a Digital Future, How Hopes and Fears About Technology Shape Children's Lives, is amazing. You should buy it. I've got it. And she is currently leading the Digital Futures Commission with the Five Rights Foundation. Please welcome Dr. Sonia Livingston. Welcome, Sonia. Could you ask for more? So, let's not hang around. Let's get straight to it. This is what we promised you. We promised you how experts would unpack how brands, content owners, and children are navigating the metaverse, what they expect and how it may and should evolve. The world of children's media is always evolving, and the latest buzzword is the metaverse, a place where children already are having fun, making, consuming, and socializing. But what is the metaverse, and what are children doing when they are there? Experts discuss. So we're going to do this in 4 questions, and I would love for you to put your questions on Slido. Pete's down here to help me. I've got an iPad here with Slido. If you've got questions as we go through, please put them on Slido, or even shout them out. Let's be unruly. It's crazy. It's the last day. The 4 questions are, number 1, what is it? Does anyone know what it is? Put your hand up if you know what it is. Okay, all right, we'll see. Why is it important? What could possibly go wrong? And, well, how the bloody hell are we going to use it? Those are our 4 questions. Let's go to it. Sonia.
Yes.
What is it?
I know, academics love definitions. As I just said to Gary before coming in, it seems a bit of an empty signifier. It's a bit of all things to all people, whatever we hope the future might be, whatever we want to invest in, or perhaps it's what we fear. So is it a fantastic connected opportunity where kids can play and roam and enjoy life and be creative, or is it an opportunity for new kinds of sexual and commercial exploitation, for new kinds of risk, for new kinds of fear? We've got a very kind of binary, we don't know. Is it good? Is it terrible? Shall we bring it on? Shall we close it down?
So are you saying we don't know what it is?
I think we have these 2 really contrasting visions, but we could say we've been here before. Maybe it's second life, brought back, third life.
David?
Yeah.
I'm going to give away my secret at the beginning, which is, I think Sonia's right. We don't really know what it is. It's not here yet. And my secret is that if we talk about it the way that we want it to exist, the way we want it to play out in the next 10, 20 years, we stand a better chance of a group like this going off and saying, okay, here's what we've heard and how to make it great for kids. If we don't start talking about it in the way that we want it to be in the future, we run the risk, as we've done with so many technologies, of letting other people develop it for us who don't have kids in mind, and then having to come back and fix the problems. So I think ideally, it is that space where young people, in particular, since we're all users, but we're talking about kids, can play, work, learn, create, communicate, socialize in the ways that they want to do. It's a matter of lowering the frustration barriers that they feel right now when they engage with digital media. Why can't I take this thing from one platform to another? Why doesn't it work the same way on this that it does on my PC? Why are there these things that frustrate me all the time about using? How can we lower those frustration barriers and still keep it safe, engaging, productive, beneficial?
Anna, what I'm hearing is that we don't really know what it is actually, and it's lots of different things all at once, but it does sound to me like it's already here, and it is just the internet where children are doing things. What's your take on it? What is it?
So I asked some people what they thought. I asked 2 children.
Children?
My children, my 11-year-old and my then 8-year-old. I said, I'm going to go and do a talk about the metaverse. So what do you think that is? And my 11-year-old, I'm going to be verbatim now, so it's not very forgiving, and bear in mind that they speak to me the way they speak to their mother when they're being impatient and I'm stopping them from doing something they really want to do. But my 11-year-old said, what? What is it? I don't know, games? And my 8-year-old looked at me, and he has form for this kind of thing, but he looked at me sort of squarely in the eyes and he said, the world of light or the world of darkness? And I said, what do you mean by that, Rory? And he said, I'm moving from the world of light to the world of darkness. And then he walked out of the room. And we haven't yet completely unpacked that. I'm sure we will. But I guess my takeaway from that is that certainly my eldest, who spends a great deal of time playing all sorts of games, I mean, games with balls and cricket and football in particular, but also a huge amount of Minecraft and Fortnite and games online with friends. The only thing he could possibly imagine that this was about games. That's what he associated with it. And my youngest, I really don't know what he thought. And, you know, I think that for him, you know, there's all these sort of, it doesn't really matter. He says these things because he thinks they're funny, but really what he's telling me is that, you know, the labeling that I put on things, on his play or his time or the universe that he's imagining, you know, that the way he's spending time in his head, that he's controlling it.
Because to them it is nothing other than their daily lived experience.
Yeah.
If I can just tie together what you were saying and what I was saying, ideally no child will ever say, Mom, I'm going off to play in the metaverse, I'll be back for dinner.
Then we
I think
failed.
that would be the worst thing that could happen is if they're calling it the metaverse. They just want to play. They just want to explore. They want to learn, and they want to do it in the ways that are easy for them and you know, logical for them. And so they can have different visions of it, and they'll say, it's the thing that I love best. It's the thing that I'm chasing after.
Yeah, if they even think that's important at all. And I mean, when you asked me this question, Gary, when we were preparing for this session a while ago, I did that really annoying panelist thing where I said, well, I'll tell you what I think it's not.
But that's not the question I'm asking.
But I suppose what I wanted to provoke with that is two things. On the one hand, that if anybody was able to give a concrete, fluent, and certain answer to this question today, I'd be very suspicious of them. I wouldn't believe they knew what they were talking about, and I would think that they were approaching something with a particular agenda that they wanted to construct, similar to your point, but maybe one that I wouldn't be very trusting of. And secondly, and this is more, I suppose, tactical, my impression, maybe this isn't true, but a lot of you put your hand up when Gary asked. And my impression is that virtual reality has become very closely associated with a what is the metaverse type question. And I don't believe that that's necessarily an inevitable assumed part of it. And
in a way, I mean, something that we were discussing before is maybe what kids would prefer is augmented reality because they want to be in their world,
Correct.
in their home, with their friends, in the park, but with that overlay, which, you know, we were discussing before, Anna, in a way, they already have that. They've already got that kind of imaginative, you know, they are they put on the personae, they act the narrative, they see the world through the kind of imaginative lens. Can technology amplify that? Can they still be connected to other people in that space? Does it have to be, you know, in that virtual world that cuts them off from things, which they enjoy in some ways, but I don't know. I'm amazed that people aren't thinking more about AR rather than VR.
And why does it even have to be a screen? You know, it could be augmented audio.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, I think maybe there are some words which I feel do closely connect, and that's around immersiveness. But that can be delivered in all sorts of ways.
And to the extent that it's a creator's world as well, or a creative world as well as a consumption world, being able to share their stories through augmented reality.
Right.
Through the, you know, it's a fairly simple medium for creating and tagging and placing things so that they become able to tell their own stories into the world.
Yeah. And with others, because what kids say most often is they want to be in the world and they want to be able to connect with other people in that world. They want it to be sociable. So I think a lot of the anxieties, but also a lot of the opportunities center around what those new kind of social relations will look like and what norms will grow up around it.
There was just a story in the last 2 days. I was somewhat saving this for what could go wrong, but it seems to tie in here about asking a group of young people to work for 40 hours of the week in virtual reality. they were far less productive than they were in the regular world, and they all had migraines. And I thought, this is obvious to me. You are asking people to take on the worst parts of the working day, of the working world, and put it into an immersive world like this, when really, why are we not using it for the things that you're talking about, and you're talking about that are the aspects you can only do in an immersive world, the collaborative effort of if I'm in virtual reality and I can see what someone else is working on and we can both have our hands in it, why try to make it into the worst parts?
And this is something I think we got wrong in the pandemic. I mean, in a way, the pandemic was the most fantastic, for a media researcher, it was like my perfect experiment. Let's turn off the world and put all the kids just in the screens. And what did we discover? They hated it. I mean, it was interesting for a while. They got really fed up with it. They felt cut off from other people. They wanted can I please go outside, see my friends? And so somehow that's what technology, can the metaverse enable that? I don't know.
So, we've still not actually said what it is, have we?
All
said what it
things to all
isn't.
people.
Has anybody got their own definition? Does anybody say, this is what I think it is? Yes, there's a lady. Where's the microphone people? There's people with microphones. Where are they? Joe, you've got a really big voice. You could just shout.
If we're trying to define what it is, and we were talking about technology and VR there, is it more the case then that the technology is the access point rather than the place itself? The metaverse is actually just a concept.
I would probably say the technologies are an access point that you
But isn't the metaverse supposed to be ubiquitous? Isn't it supposed to be a place where these technologies converge, cross over, and we can go from one to the other seamlessly? And that's not the case, is it?
And I would include in that the real world as well, that there may be things that you do in a virtual world that you then extend, whether it's through augmented reality, whether it's just by meeting up with your friends and continuing the story, going on some sort of treasure hunt or experience, or something that you order in a virtual world and that gets delivered physically to your door. So you're extending your fandom, you're extending your connection to the content.
Anna, does your 8-year-old, do they prefer to kind of go and play Minecraft and with their friends and sort of journey through that particular vista where they're building and making and sharing? Or would they prefer to go and, subject group of one, of course, or would they prefer to go to Fortnite and blast the hell out of somebody with a pig's head? How do children differentiate how they play in these open worlds with their friends?
So he does both those things.
Sorry?
He does both those things.
Both.
He likes both those things. He'll do that physically in a room with friends where they are together on individual screens, talking to one another about where they're going next and what they're doing collectively, which I find it extraordinary. I say, when you're having a play date, do something that you can only do when you're physically together. Don't do the thing that you can do when you're in separate houses. But that's, what do I know? I think that, I think it would be... I don't want us to go down, and it would be disingenuous, of course, to go down a road that then ends up saying that the metaverse is an abstract concept and doesn't exist at all, and it is just a layer of imagination, because I don't think that's true either. And imagination is, I hope, persistent and part of childhood and play and has nothing to do with the technology. And there are, what's real for children now, whether it's metaverse or not, is certainly virtual worlds, and virtual worlds that they spend time in and they adventure in, build in, certainly in the case of my kids, create in. I don't know if they want to learn in it, but they do learn in it, and I think that your point, around kind of interconnectivity and into the real world and into those worlds and then across those worlds, that's the closest I'll come to putting my cards on the table to say, yeah, that's the first step of turning what those virtual worlds are into something that's closer to, I'm more comfortable with calling a metaverse. It is that interconnectivity.
So we're talking about, actually what we're talking about, before we move on to the next question, I want to try and pull this together in as much way as I can. What I think we're talking about is play when we talk about children. Is that fair? Is that a good place to start? So when children go into the metaverse, whatever that might be, Joe's point, taking on board Joe's point as well, children are going there to play. And if I'm hearing you correctly, what that means is that they go there to play. Yes, we've got to make it so it's safe and all those sort of things. But they go in there to explore in much the same way as they would in the real world, but it's digitally enabled in some way. Is that a fair kind of rounding off of this conversation so far? Have I missed anything?
Well, I think you haven't. It's got to be more than the gaming world. It's not choosing this gaming world or that.
I'm not talking about gaming, I'm talking about play.
Yeah,
Play is more than gaming.
Play is more than gaming. So somehow we have to get that idea of everything being interconnected and being able to go from one kind of space to another kind of space, and one participating with one set of people or another, and taking identities with you, continuing a narrative across different spaces. It's got to be that sense of immersive, but also possibilities without end.
Okay, so it's a place I can go as a child and I can experience all the things that I might want to experience: sound, music, light, stories, video, whatever I might want, play with my friends, but then I can turn it off and I can go and play in the real world as well. And I take some of those emotional experiences with me when I leave.
You know, I think it may be important to say at this point that I don't think the metaverse is really aimed at or intended for or ultimately will be for kids under, let's say, 6 to 8, roughly that age. Younger kids, preschool kids, will get knock-on benefits from the things that will emerge from the metaverse. You'll be able to migrate more easily across the games that they are playing.
Well, hold that, because we're coming on to that stuff in a minute.
Okay,
yeah.
But I think when we talk about play, we should be talking, play and learning and communication and socializing and all of the things that once you hit that age, you really start to meld together.
Because it takes a certain kind of cognitive grasp, because it requires you to decode a 2D world with a 3D imagination.
That and just who's in control, that parents are still in control below the age of 6 or so, that you need to have a certain amount of knowledge about exploring the real world before you're ready to explore the virtual world.
Okay, I'm going to ask you, our learned audience, to take what you will from that 10 minutes, because I as sure as hell can't summarise that for you. Let's move on. Why is it important? We've got people here that are giving their time to listen to what you learned people are going to tell them. It's obviously important to them. Why is it important to you? David.
Well, I'm going to say it's important because it's following how young people want to do things. If we look at young people's behavior during the pandemic, they showed us how they wanted to basically hack the world to make it work for them. So the term that I often use is down on the corner, went up on the server. All the ways that they were trying to be social, all the ways that they were used to playing, they couldn't do anymore. And so they found digital replacements for them. And when they hit a barrier, they would hack through it. So, I can't talk to my friends while I'm playing in this game. Well, I'll go over to Discord and I'll talk with my friends on Discord. And that's the kind of frustration level that I was talking about before when it doesn't work the way I want it to, are we helping them find solutions so that things do work? The other thing I'd say is, I'll say that Dubbit is hiring now 18, 19, 20-year-olds who grew up in these proto-metaverse worlds, who grew up playing Roblox, who grew up playing in Minecraft. And we're finding that they taught themselves to code, taught themselves to develop games because they wanted to play the way they wanted to play. They wanted to create the games that they wanted to play. And so it was intrinsically motivated learning that has now brought them to a point where it's got real value in their working world. And we are putting together these 18, 19, 20-year-olds with the 30, 40-year-olds who've been working in games for a long time, and creating the synthesis of people who really understand the platforms and how their generation wants to play, and people who understand how to build. So for the people in this room, how to build a business, how to build a game. The term I've given to it is the learnification of gaming. We all know about the gamification of learning.
The learnification of gaming.
Learnification of gaming. Intrinsically motivated learning that they gain through the ways that they're playing online.
And the metaverse is responsible for that thing.
To lead.
That's one of the reasons why it's important.
And that's where, as you're saying, we're not sure they're learning yet, but I think they are learning. They are learning by their own exploration.
They're always learning when they're playing.
Exactly.
Of course, is certainly the Lego Group's point of view. I mean, I think your question is interesting, and obviously I've been thinking about it. And I guess I would like to add a word, because for me it's why is it important now? And Sonia and I were talking earlier about Second Life, and almost 20 years ago I did a book launch in Second Life when I worked for Penguin. Some people in this room may have helped me on that, and we launched, Snow Crash by Neil Stevenson in Second Life virtually, and had people come and have a reading from the author and explore concepts in a 3D world and meet people from all over the world as avatars virtually. That's not new. It's not a new thing. Why is it important now? Why is it on this agenda now? It hasn't been on this agenda for the last decade, but there have been virtual worlds. And I suppose there's a few things. So firstly, there is this idea of interoperability and connectivity across. And I think that is new, and that's probably, for all sorts of reasons, essentially to do with technology's maturity. But your point around young people growing up and now getting to the age of working in business and creating their own media and content. So there's just a maturity in talent that's coming of age, as you say, having grown up in these worlds. That's another kind of why it's important now. And the third thing that obviously makes it, for us at the Lego Group, why is it important to us is because of relevance. Is because if it's important to kids, then it's going to be important to us. If it's important to people, it's going to be important to us because we want to understand and give back to their life and where they're playing. We want to make sure that we're being able to help them and give them the tools that they want to play. I know you want to say something.
No.
Go on.
No.
I can see it.
Well,
Yeah.
Well, I would add another reason why it's. I mean, I actually got up this morning and I thought, actually, maybe it's not very important, and why am I coming here today and doing this long journey? And then I thought, well, the reason it's important is that people here believe it's important, and lots of people believe it's important, and that means a lot of very smart people are going to put in money and investment and energy, and that could be a fantastic benefit to kids. And so if there's going to be this huge, for whatever reason that it's now, something is happening now, it can benefit kids, and I think rather than, why is it important, what would then make that of benefit to kids, to me, is the really crucial question. Because I agree with you, kids want more from their play worlds, they want more from their kind of digital possibilities. There's lots of frustrations. But there's also lots of things that this investment in the metaverse could do, because kids have got a lot of other problems. They are living in poverty, they are living with family difficulties, they're living with a crisis in mental health right now, they're living with an incredibly uncertain future, they're living with all kinds of frictions and conflict, and I won't go to the political turmoil, but there's a lot going wrong in kids' lives that I guess I hear parents and to some extent kids too, hoping that online will kind of compensate for kids maybe who can't go and play outside. This is somewhere they can play. For kids who don't find it easy to see their friends, this is a place where they can see their friends. For kids who don't have educational opportunities, this is where they might learn.
And this is why I went immediately to the group in this room has the opportunity to shape
absolutely.
it. And that if we don't, it will be shaped by others, and that...
And for other benefit and for other purposes.
For the last 2 days, we've been talking about what defines public service in children's media and children's content. What defines public service in the metaverse? What are we going to create that is going to speak to the problems that you were talking about just now?
Right.
Scale is another thing. I mean, I've got my numbers from my office about 2.8 billion people playing games right now. 200,000 monthly active users on Roblox. So just the opportunity to reach audiences like we have never had a chance to reach. You're saying nothing's new. I go back to the times of 360 commissioning in television. And 360 commissioning, the problem with it was the commissioner's 360, not the child's. It was this desperate feeling of there may be an eyeball somewhere that I am not reaching, so I need to be on all platforms. And a lot of people spent a lot of money to be in places that made no sense, and they didn't have an impact anywhere because they'd spread their money too thinly. So if we can turn this into, start where your audience is, start with the core of what your stories, what your characters really need to be saying, where are kids best able to receive that, and then think about how you move out to these other platforms in the metaverse.
There are some amazing questions popping in, making my mind go all over the place. And actually, most of those of you who are asking the questions, a lot of them are really relevant for the next bit. So we will get to them, I promise you. I just want to pick up on something that you said, that actually was, I think all of you said. You talked about socialization, and you talked about relevance, and then you talked about investment. And actually, it's important, isn't it? Because it is going to be the digital backbone of our children's lives for the rest of their lives. Is that fair? If we don't get it right now, it all goes horribly wrong, doesn't it? Anna?
I will happily jump on that because I think that's exactly where the Lego Group is coming from, is that we're saying, this is exciting. This could create play opportunities for children. It can allow them to explore worlds and make their own stories and, imagine things and do things that they want to, that they might not be able to otherwise. And yet, if we don't thoughtfully think of what happens when there is a child in this environment, and unfortunately spend some time thinking about what could go wrong, which I know is our next question, but think about the unhappy path, which is not what we're designing for. We want to design for innovation and joy and learning and fun and excitement. But if we're not thinking about those things, if we're not thinking about the particular strengths and vulnerabilities that a child has, learning their way in the world, understanding what's true and what's not true, or giving them the skills to be able to work that out, then we will end up with something that they will live with for the rest of their lives that isn't fit for purpose, doesn't include them, doesn't respect their rights. And that's why it's important. You
as a brand owner,
yes.
the brand owner, have embarked on a journey with Epic, which it's in the press, $2 billion worth of investment coming from Sony, and that's in the background a little bit. Are you not going to sort of close, you're going to create your own little walled garden there, aren't you? And I know, Sonia, that's a particular pinch point for you, the word walled garden. But you're circling the wagons around your brand. How are you going to embrace from that position of an ivory tower?
So it's a bit early to talk about specifics in the development process, but I wouldn't make that assumption, Gary, that that's what the Lego Group is intending to do. I wouldn't make an assumption that this, for instance, is the end of our partnerships rollout, that our intention is to create a walled garden that's just for kids, because that's not what we want to do. We want to work. We have lots of partnerships. We partner with Five Rights Foundation, for instance, and the Digital Futures Commission, partnered with UNICEF. We've partnered with lots of different organizations with the same intention, which is that we believe that this, third iteration of the internet is being built, and we want to be there to represent. And I feel so lucky that I work for a privately owned company that's owned by a family, so they can choose how they spend their money, and they wish to spend their money by, we don't have to think in the same way about shareholder value, and they wish to spend their money on investing in a future that enables children to have the right experience, be protected, but also participate and innovate. So that concept of walled garden, I wouldn't get too hung up on that, because I've said a lot about interoperability, and that should be a clue about how we see things.
So there's a question here that I'd want to pick up on from Anonymous, not the terrible hacker group, rather somebody hasn't given us a name. How will the metaverse become a space that is accessible for all? Because something that's really worrying me about what you're saying is digital poverty, which we have a lot of even here. Right? And we're saying, this is the future, whoopee-doo. Actually, 30% of kids can't go there.
And this is the problem. I mean, we've seen this again in the pandemic. It's been very obvious. All the effort that's gone into digital learning has served to exclude, in really significant proportions, even though it's provided an amazing opportunity for kids to connect and to learn. And we could say the same about opportunities to play, opportunities to socialize. The more we put it on a a digital infrastructure that is expensive and that has privileged routes through for kids with better connectivity and more devices. And it will be, the digital divide is growing, not lessening, and it will be a source of all kinds of new kinds of inequality and exclusion. And it's going to be really hard. We have to have really targeted programs to overcome that, not just to say we provide the same for everyone and then there's unequal take-up because that reproduces inequalities. We're going to have to think about ways of overcoming disadvantage and providing kind of specific pathways in for those who really... So that might mean involving public services, schools getting involved in the metaverse, public libraries getting involved, youth centres, maybe there has to be other kinds of entry points, and they will all bring their own, sort of particular ethos about what's good for kids and what kids' rights are.
So do you think then that the power, back to why it's important, the power, the head of steam that this thing is building up might force the hand of lots of other parts of governance and accessibility and make us kind of make things a little bit more available?
What's happening with digital governance right now is, in a way, it's pushing in the opposite direction. That's the difficulty, isn't it? So if you follow arguments about data protection or child safety, or, for very good reasons, but they put more barriers up and they put, create more different kinds of spaces where maybe children get stuck in a safe but very limited space. Our challenge is finding governance structures that are going to enable children to be safe or safer in all kinds of spaces in the world, not just in a walled garden, not in a funny little space off on their own.
This is a micro and macro challenge as well, that you're talking about getting schools, libraries, and such involved. Going back to the World Summit on Media for Children in 2000 in South Africa, and I remember one of the keynote speakers saying, yes, back then they called it the information superhighway, will come to South Africa, but will South Africans be driving the cars? That how do we make sure that it's not just within the UK, within the US, where I'm based, but also that we have kids all over the world and young people who are able to participate in this. And I think one of the answers is this thing, that if you look at how mobile technology has been used in developing world countries in particular, it's been so much more inventive to solve particular problems. So I think there are opportunities that are low data, low technology, that allow them to tap into the communication side of it, at least, the exploration and connecting with people in other places.
But there is a tension, isn't there, between what seems like the kind of sexy high-tech end, which is, kind of data-heavy and doesn't stop and think about, making sure you've got assisted technology for people with disabilities. There's a lot of kind of, let's get ahead, let's get the best, the fastest, the shiniest, and then, people like me come in and say,
we'll catch up later.
Yeah, we'll catch up later with all. I hear that from so many startups. Yeah, we'll get to the child rights later.
I'm going to move us on to our third question.
Yeah,
which is, what could possibly go wrong? Somebody asked the question here about why wasn't Ready Player One mentioned in defining the metaverse? And the reason it wasn't mentioned was because I think it was Neil Stephenson's 1992 book, I don't know why I'm looking at you because he's American, 1992 book Snow Crash, which was about, strangely prophetically, it was about a world after a massive economic meltdown where the most important thing were the personal brands of people. What could possibly go wrong? I mean, there is a dystopian element to this, isn't there? There really is, and I know Emma Cooper's asked the question, what could possibly go right? And I think we should think about that and maybe answer this question in that way. But Anna, you have quite a CV in terms of ensuring the well-being and safety of children, and this must be something that you consider very closely.
Yeah, and, of course, we have to think all the time about what could possibly go wrong. And I don't want in any way to imply that starting from safety and going through safety by design, privacy by design, the protection of children, and not just children, but vulnerable, marginalised, parts of society, different users with different abilities, that has to be still that first priority. Of course it is. In physical world, and as a toy company, that is for us. We have physical QA, we make sure that things aren't going to choke children or to poison them. And, all of those standards are incredibly important. But I really like the what could go right question. I think that's a great question. And that's, I suppose, where the LEGO Group is really trying to think ourselves as an organisation and to work with others. And, and that means when it's appropriate, working with other organisations, other people in our industry, so technology organisations, media companies, other toy organisations, not-for-profit organisations, legislators, as much as possible to sort of encourage that kind of thought process, to encourage instead, and Sonia, you should talk, of course, about the DFC work, but how do we incentivize innovation and what good could look like, and how can we put that up as something inspiring for all of the practitioners in the room here, for all of the people who want to do great things. Of course, we've got to make sure that those things that could go wrong, because they're awful things that could go wrong, like really serious bad things. But we don't want to just look at that, because that will get us into the situation where we just cut kids out of these experiences.
And some of the things, we know the things are going wrong already. In a way, that's why it is interesting looking back at Second Life or Habbo Hotel or the interesting afterlife of Club Penguin. And we've been through a kind of sequence of these experiments where we treat kids a bit too much as the canaries in the coal mine. We kind of put them in the space, or they get into the space or whatever, and then we discover too late in the day protections are needed, things can go wrong, adults are ill-intentioned, no one is even listening to notice when things go wrong. So, there's a lot, we're seeing this playing out with social media now, it's big with games now, so it's not that we don't know the story. And what's curious in a way is that we haven't distilled the knowledge to make it go right. And I think, Anna mentioned by design solutions. I think that's where the momentum is now. So if we can really think in advance, in anticipation, before building something, what are the safety things that need to be built into the system? What are the privacy requirements that need to be embedded before we ever open it up and let anyone do what they want? So, so I would say child rights by design. Let's think of the whole range of what children have a right to expect, what they need for their well-being and development, and embed all of that range.
So this presumes that we know what's best for them.
Well, we do know some things. We know that certain degree of safety, of privacy. I think there are some things beyond the obvious. I think there's a really interesting debate going on about surveillance now, about just how much it's appropriate that children should grow up where they're always being watched, their data is constantly collected, there's a camera or recording about every single movement, every single step. We don't know what it means to grow up completely watched, completely tracked, completely surveilled. So I think some of those things, we just have to say, we don't know. Let's be cautious and let's not throw the kids in as the canary in the coal mine.
Can I ask you a question that Gerald Strother has asked? Where's Gerald? Gerald. Hello, Gerald. Gerald says, should we keep out of it? We'll only ruin it. Should we leave it to the kids to imagine and design the metaverse? Something in that, isn't there? How are you using children in your vision of what things might be, Anna?
We talk to children and listen to children all the time. And so I guess my answer to that is that's a lovely idea. I'd love to see the metaverse that my kids would make. I think it would be amazing, probably frightening.
And scary.
Yeah. And I suppose, but it's not... it's not us I'm worried about. It's everyone else, it's other people as well. It's just that we can't, I think it would be irresponsible for those who have an opportunity to set frameworks up to enable innovation to step away from that and then let people who might not have those what's best for children, the understanding what child rights is, in instead. That's I suppose, the thing. It's a bit like someone's got to do it, and who do you trust to do it? Well, I trust us. I trust people who care about children and care about their experience, you know, and I think that's what I really want to see.
So is the most important thing to avoid us being here in a year, so we go, oh my goodness, we've really messed this up. Is the most important thing that we keep children at the epicenter of our thinking, that we talk and engage and play and learn and iterate with kids, David?
And I think there's a much greater opportunity than ever before for constant co-creation. It's not just a matter of doing research with kids, which absolutely you should be doing, and you know, on a regular basis. But it's also a matter of watching what's going on inside the platform. So, I mean, there are 2,000 Lego games on Roblox right now, none of them created by Lego. 100,000 Squid Game games created in the first month after Squid Games debuted on Netflix. In the past, not so far in the past, company would send out cease and desist letters to 8-year-olds and say, you know, stop it, please. And now one of the top people at Netflix said, this is great. This is how we're learning how our audience wants to engage with our content. And when we go forward and build our own content, when we, you know, we understand. I was giving a presentation at MIP and was supposed to be co-presenting with Coolaby talking about warrior cats. Unfortunately, the person who was going to present tested positive, so I ended up being their presenter. But the key to this was warrior cats started as books. At some point, they decided we should probably be on Roblox. We should probably have a presence there. And they went out and started looking at what existed on Roblox. And what they found was a teenager in Florida who had built the world that they would create if they were creating it themselves. And so instead of starting from scratch or saying, you stop that because we want to build our own, they went and they entered into a partnership with this teenager who continues to build the world for them.
So, okay, I've got two more questions here that I want to ask before we move on to some more positive and the more the upside. Pete says, Anonymous again, says, don't you think it will create people who don't understand the real world? So you create a Warrior Cats Roblox experience, they spend all the time in there, and actually they end up desensitized, desocialized, and a complete wreck.
That's one of the reasons why I say I don't think it's really going to be intended, appropriate for kids younger than a certain age. But I think also, I mean, first of all, it's an argument for teaching media literacy from the earliest ages, that we absolutely have to incorporate that into the curriculum. But I also think that if you watch how young people play in these social gaming platforms, they may start by talking about the game, but they will continue to talk about everything else in their lives. It's that down on the corner went up on the server, that they may be immersed in playing in Minecraft together and building in Minecraft together. But it's like sitting in the front seat of the car and listening to the kids' conversation in the back when they forget that you're there. If you listen to the kids as they're playing, they're talking about their entire lives. So they are bringing their entire lives to the digital platforms as well as to their real world.
And the reverse. So
and
also,
yeah.
when whatever they're doing online, they then talk about it when they're at school, when they're at home, when they haven't got access to any screens. So there's the conversation carries on, and kids are always sharing tips and insights and how do you get around this and why don't you try that next time. So as long as there's, as long as it's not like 100% immersion and they never they never take the headset off. But as long as they're moving in and out, there are lots of other moments where they have conversations with adults, where they explain to their parents what's going on, where they, we hope, discuss in school, so they get that kind of media literacy input.
This makes me a bit uncomfortable.
Okay.
Because as children learn by doing, we learn by doing, we learn by actually engaging in the real world with real things, and that's how our species learns. And what you're advocating, it seems to me, is a brilliant digital space. And as long as it's great, it's okay that they go there. How do we monitor that?
They are doing in that.
I know, but if we give them even more, they'll go there all the time, and then they'll end up like little box heads.
That's what we learned in the pandemic. They really didn't want to be there the whole time. They wanted to come out. They wanted to do other things.
Yeah.
They went back downstairs and watched.
So our audience can feel secure that they can make something marvelous for the metaverse. The children will go find it, they will play it, and they will leave it, and then they will go and play in the park.
So because we're both really passionate about this, I know, and Sonia inspires me a lot when we work together. But, firstly, we never needed technology for children to get obsessed with something. Right? They just get obsessed with things. That's part of how they also learn. And I play a lot of walking around being a Pokemon all the time. It's got nothing to do with the screen. It's just how we spend our days. You know, I think the idea that we would create something marvelous and kids would be in it all the time, I don't think anyone is advocating that. I don't think that's true. And I don't think kids want it either. And I think that kids want a balanced diet of play.
Yep.
And they do want to spend time in something that's marvelous and magical. And they want to then play football. And they want to do different things. And the truth that is sadly true that I get to see as part of my professional life is that kids don't have very much time to play anymore, actually. And in that short amount of time, then they prioritize. If they prioritize spending time in a digital environment that has been created with the right care and thought around, ensuring that it isn't going to commercially, sexually exploit them, all of these things, then that's okay, because I believe that they will want to do other things too. And I also believe that part of what I mean by saying that we will create it responsibly is that we will, and I'm speaking for all of you, so tell me if you've got an opposing view to this, but we must be creating things that don't have dark patterns of addiction at their core, that we must be creating things that are mindful of the fact that there has to be a natural break that isn't going to ensure compulsive behavior in children. That is our responsibility, that we make things that have that moment where a child doesn't have to be there for 6 hours at a time. It can still be magical and marvelous, though.
I think we saw it play out in real life, that if you look at how kids spent time with media during the pandemic and then coming out of it, we'd been predicting for a while that when they were able to be back together in person, they would set aside the devices and they'd be desperate to be back with their friends out on the playground. And we've seen it play out, that October, when we measured in October and again in April, levels of media use, levels of screen, I hate the term screen time, but in this case it's literal, levels of screen engagement went right back to where they were pre-pandemic.
And that was right around the world as well, wasn't it? You could see the same pattern almost everywhere.
They wanted to put it aside. The other thing I was going to say is, and I'm losing my train of thought, that, go on.
Well, can I just really emphasize that point about compulsive? Because I think if the metaverse is an immersive space where children are agents, that could be fantastic. If it's a compulsive space where other people are driving them and pushing them and holding them somewhere that even after they want to leave,
So there's a very good question right here. Which says, great opportunities have been mentioned, but would you agree that the metaverse space currently seems to be more focused on monetization and consumerism rather than better education, socialization, the nicer stuff? How do we do better for the kids of the future? Big question. But I mean, that's what, this is a problem.
Absolutely. The money is in pushing them in directions that will spend more, look at more ads, generate more data for profit. So the child rights answer is that children's best interests have to come first, and that the commercial interests in profiling or selling or monetizing have always got to be secondary. And that should be the question. I'm sure people here do ask themselves, all the time in a kind of iterative way, so that we keep what is good for children over and above what is bringing in the profit.
We've only got about 8 minutes, so we're going to go to our last question, which we've already started talking about. There's a lot of people. Who's got a brand that they would like to put into the metaverse somehow? Has anyone got a show or something they don't quite know what to... Anybody?
Yeah.
One?
One
yes? Yeah? One, maybe two? Yep. So there's quite a few of you dotted around. Fantastic. Thank you for the lights. Right. So what advice can we give to these people that are sitting there and they don't have, forgive me, Anna, they don't have $2 billion to spend on the metaverse? Have you? Have you got $2 billion? No. How can these people, if this is going to be the railroad, the digital railroad that our children are on for the rest of their lives, how can these people use the metaverse? You're not going to let them come play in your metaverse, are you?
I'm not going to comment on that. Well, because maybe we will, because we believe in the interoperability of the metaverse, and also we know how children play. Children play by mashing up their toys, right? Children play by creating their own worlds.
Absolutely.
That's not the question I want to answer, but that's a whole different session another time. you know, I guess, so how do we use it? There's a load of different answers to that. The easiest answer, which is probably less helpful, is actually just, it's a storytelling mechanic, right? It's a way in which that you're able to enable children to understand your world, to meet your characters, you know, and to explore it themselves. And so conceptually, that's one thing. Practically, what does that mean? I think things you were talking about with user-generated content is really interesting. I think creating opportunities and not having a cease and desist type mentality, but having instead, you know, content creation opportunities and tools, I think that's interesting, and that would probably be something that I would think about seriously if I wasn't in the privileged position, you're quite right, that I find myself in.
David? Sorry, Sonia.
So I was just going to say, I mean, there's a research finding that I would paraphrase as, over and again we see, even though there's all these fantastic opportunities, 90% go and they use what they're given and they play with that. It's only 10% that create, make, you know, or even kind of engage with, and very few that kind of successfully create in a way that that becomes, you know, their kind of, you know, they really kind of add back to the world. So it's, yes, you know, so if what anyone here can do is create opportunities where children can be agents, where they can really, you know, make something for themselves, because it's still not happening on a mass scale by comparison with using what's already given. And maybe we should just emphasize, you know, we're talking about children, but they're so diverse amongst themselves, and they want so many different kinds of things. And maybe one of the things about the metaverse is it can provide more diversity and more variety, because in children's regular lives they actually can't go and be all these different things and pursue all their niche interests, and, you know, find other people who have their hobby or their kind of, you know, fan identity, whatever it is. So maybe, but then the challenge is, how do they find it? And the pressures are all about pushing everyone towards the same thing rather than really.
So it's a divergent digital space where they can explore wherever they want to go.
And I'm going to be really I'll be very practical about it. You know, as we move from Web 2 centralized media to Web 3 decentralized media, and don't ask me any more questions about that because that's the extent to which I understand Web 3, there are more and more opportunities for everyone, from the big corporations down to the lemonade stands, the individuals. But just from the experience that we've had already in building Roblox immersions, there are many ways to do it. You don't have to build a massive world that's going to cost you $500,000 or pounds, and that's going to require that you maintain it and spend more money over time. You can insert your characters, your content, your brands into someone else's world that already exists. Create a little space within there in partnership with them. You can create a short-term immersion. We've just done a couple weeks for the UEFA Women's Euros, where leading up to the launch of the tournament, we created a world where kids could play with it. So that's, you know, 6 weeks and then it goes away. Or you can build that massive world. So there are ways to engage in it in bits and pieces. And one of my favorite stories from it is we created a very small world for a television concept that was launching that had never been seen before. It had come from a book, but the show had never been out there before. And launched it with £1,000 worth of advertising on the Roblox platform. And within a weekend, we had tens of thousands of players. But even better than that, we had people making YouTube videos saying, "What is this? I've never seen this before. What's this story? Where can I find more of it?" So we got the people who made the television show got the knock-on effect of kids getting out and promoting it for them, and coming into the game and getting, you know, tens of thousands of players, right?
But on a more practical level, because Roblox is one space, right? And there are a bazillion different spaces. You know, is there opportunity? There's a very good question here. There's a number of questions in this vein, so I'm going to summarize them all together. Is there opportunity, for example, to make a TV show that just plays out in the metaverse, whatever that might be? Is that a thing? Could that be a thing?
We know that people will go to special events in the metaverse. We know that 33 million people went to see Lil Nas X on a metaverse platform. You can get 90,000 into Wembley. Already, apparently, this year, more people have seen metaverse concerts than physical concerts. We don't know yet, will people go there for their daily viewing? Will they show up every day to watch Bluey? That's a bad example, too young, but will they show up every day to watch a particular program? Will they gather? Will it be back to the idea of assembling to watch and through the social platforms, you're talking while you're watching.
So it's just like in the old days sitting around a wireless, really. You'd all come around and you're sharing a media experience together. Nothing changes, does it? We've got to stop because we've got a red flashing light. I would love to have summarised this all beautifully in one neat little box and tied it up with a bow, and it's been far-ranging and very wide-ranging, and thank you. What I think I will do is I will try and distill this into something of an essay, if you want a better expression. I'll share it with you, you can sign it off, and then we'll give it to CMC, and then you can have that rather than me try and flummox summing up of all of this, because my head's hurting, frankly. I've got lots of notes, and I can't make head nor tail of them. Hopefully you've enjoyed that. Hopefully that's given you food for thought. So Sonia Livingston, David Kleeman, Anna Rafferty, thank you very much. Right, one last message before you go. Thank you once again to Omen Studios. And just a quick reminder that this session is the flagship for it says Hool. I think they mean whole strand of video content under the title Understanding Kids that is sitting waiting for you on the CMC 2022 library. There are 17 short videos packed with research insights, all easy to fit into your days and all exclusively to you by the 30th of September. Next session in here is Commissioner's Conversation, Teens at 2 p.m. and The Art of Preschool, also at 2 p.m. in the Adelphi room. If you haven't had your lunch, go get your lunch. Thank you very much. Goodbye.